The rand smashed through 14 rand to the US dollar following news that Gordhan has been summoned on charges of fraud. The rand plummeted against major currencies following the news that the finance minister has been summoned on charges of fraud. Gordhan's fraud charges relate to the early retirement of his former SARS deputy Ivan Pillay. Gordhan will reportedly face charges of fraud along with Pillay and former Commissioner Obama Khashula. The rand started to weaken shortly after the news of Gordhan's fraud charges emerged and drop from 13 rand 90 to 14 rand 22 against the dollar within minutes. And joining us now is ANN7's business editor Clive Ramathibela-Smith to unpack the markets. Clive Ramathibela, hello. You were, of course, at this announcement. You were saying it was very exciting. Yeah. I'm sure you could hear a pin drop at the Gauteng open tender process.
Excuse me, I have to take my call.
Must they import it himself?
Sorry, yeah? Can I take the call?
Yeah, is that
That's what happened. That's what happened. I mean, it was quite remarkable. I mean, we saw the minister go off stage, come back again, get off again. Obviously, he was being informed about what was taking place at his house. And immediately the mood in the room just changed slightly, and he described what was going on, and he explained the fact that there was people who arrived at his house to come and deliver a summons, and the fact that those people later then moved on from his house directly to his offices in Pretoria to go and deliver the summons. All this happening obviously at the backdrop of the fact that, I don't know how intelligence works, Cindy, maybe you might help me, but if you're using intelligence, you should know where the minister is. I don't know. You should know where he will be. Yeah. And this was a government event, so you would have expected them to know exactly where he was going, where he was going to be travelling. So if they wanted to have him in his hand, he would have done. I just think that it was just blown out of proportion. The fact that, it could have been done more discreetly and not done in the manner that it was done, where the minister was disturbed when he was doing, when you heard these things, you could have easily said, listen, I can't carry on with this particular event. I'm going to go back home and handle what's going on there. But he continued and he made a few jokes and everybody was laughing about it. But he stood down to his grounds and he talked about the fact that he's very much behind the law of the country and what needs to happen. I just want to go back to the rand story. Let's unbundle that. 9 o'clock this morning, that's before the announcement was made that the Minister of Finance, Gordhan, was going to be served with this summons. The rand was already depreciating. I want to express that. It was already depreciating. And there's three reasons why the rand was depreciating. The first one is the fact that the US dollar has strengthened overnight. It's simply because more optimism has come back, that the fact that they might increase interest rates in December when the Fed continues to meet. So already that had really created a little bit of a bubble because everybody was expecting that the dollar would be much stronger. And you remember yesterday we spoke about the peso, and that was also very much weak because the dollar came back very strongly. The yen, for example, the Japanese yen, that was also under pressure already. So all the emerging market currencies were already under tremendous amount of pressure because the dollar had recovered quite significantly during the early hours of the morning. So 9 o'clock comes, the rand is still depreciating, and then these news come in at about 10:30 in the morning. And then what happens immediately is that, obviously, you have a compounding effect, because obviously, if you start with the fact that you've already got a depreciating rand, then this news come on, then it becomes like a bubbling factor.
So it's not an isolated event.
So we cannot say it's an isolated issue. It's not an isolated issue. The rand was still already in the negative. So I hear a lot of media reporting that, it was all about profit. No, it wasn't. The dollar was already strong, and we can look at that. We've got factual numbers that show the fact that the dollar was already strong, and that's the reason why when 9 o'clock started, you would have seen that actually a lot of emerging market currencies were already in the negative.
Okay, let's engage Professor Janine Rousseau, business analyst at WITS, head of School of Economics and Business. Professor Rousseau, thanks so much for joining us, and just your view, because as my colleague said here, it is the prevalent headline story that the rand depreciated because of the announcement that Finance Minister is being summoned.
Good evening, Cindy. Good evening, Clive, and good evening to the listeners. Yes, the headline story is more than just the rand. It is the summons served on the Minister of Finance. Now, naturally, that will have a negative impact on the exchange rate of the rand, because the view of the world is that Minister Gordhan is instrumental in preventing a credit risk downgrade for South Africa.
Okay, Yanni, just hold on there. So if Pravin Gordhan, anything happens to him, we're likely to get a junk status.
Nothing has to happen now. What's happened is perception is already built, Cindy. So it will only take, I don't know, God's grace for us to be saved from a downgrade at the moment, because we haven't, unfortunately, covered ourselves in any much glory. So the timing, 15 days before the midterm budget speech comes out, and I mean, 2 months just before we get the rating agencies back in the country to evaluate us, they're already looking at us. We're already on their list. So the question is, was it this good timing? Could there have been a way that we could have handled this better? Yes, there are. So the question is, why such an abrupt way of doing things, and at a very sensitive point of our economic status?
Yeah, but Professor Rousseau, I'm sure they'll be looking at a myriad of other issues in terms of how South Africa, on the one side, has put forward a united front when it comes to monetary policy and the stability, the marginal growth that we enjoyed of 3.3% with the GDP, that it won't just be about whether Finance Minister is summoned or not.
Cindy, whether we want this to know this or not, Mr. Pravin Gordhan is really seen as the steady hand at the Treasury. And the view is that if he's no longer at the Treasury, it will give President Zuma the opportunity to raid the Treasury. Whether we like that, whether we think it's true or not, that is the international view. There's confidence in Mr. Gordhan. There's no confidence in President Zuma.
Okay, so how do you mitigate all of that, Clive, in the bigger scheme of things that, of course, we want to have the stability and certain external factors are beyond our control? And if the international market or foreign investors have got that sense, as Professor Rousseau suggests, that indeed it's a very precarious situation we find ourselves in.
3 factors, quickly. First one, we globalized. 2004, we said we are opening our market to the rest of the world. And so we are going to be scrutinized and be looked upon based on what the world thinks about us as an economy. Secondly, is prioritizing. What is the priority? Is priority the economy? Is priority the charges that is being laid against the finance ministry? Because the detrimental effects of what will happen if the finance minister is found himself in court or has been charged is going to be very, very difficult to reverse from. I know countries that take about 15 years to come back from junk status. And for the fact that we do have some sort of reliance in terms of budget that is outside the country, which is debt that we owe to the rest of the world. Firstly, that foreign amount of debt will go up, our interest rates will go up. It means that the poor of this country will be at a detriment. So that's when you need to prioritize. So who comes first, country or minister? So it's a simple thing as that. So can we delay this slightly until we get back maybe into the new year and we have a look? It can be done. It can be delayed. The last thing I want to mention, which is very, very fundamentally important to this whole concept, is that, you know, we are sitting here and we are talking about a 0.4% growth. We're sitting here, we're talking about the fees must fall saga that is taking place, that is taking an entire country, which is the most serious thing that have ever hit South Africa in the recent democratic South Africa that we have. And then we are sitting as well with the fact that we've got the highest unemployment rate ever since the history of this country. The question is, what are we going to prioritize? Are we going to prioritize the fact that we are going to be looking and chasing after people who are holding high stakes, who are sitting in treasury? And I'm not saying that everybody is not equal to the law. I think everybody is. But the question is, do we prioritize that on top of what is already taking place, or our fundamental economic defects that are already happening in our country?
Yeah, Professor Rousseau, what works in South Africa's favour now, especially with the favourable bond markets with yields of 9% compared to other emerging markets, and whether the rand will still make gains under the circumstances? What is your view?
It's difficult to say. Up to now, we could not really determine the full effect of the inflow of the AB InBev transaction in respect of the SAB Miller buyout of shareholders. So, yes, of course, that supported the rand, but the pressure on the Minister of Finance is really viewed very negatively by financial markets. Whether we like it or not, is well respected, is well known in international financial markets, and the world has confidence in him as Minister of Finance. So this will have a negative effect on South Africa's international standing, including the exchange rate of the rand.
But do you think, worst case scenario, we could hit the 20 rand to the dollar exchange rate as we saw earlier in the year.
You know what's sad? What's sad is that you and I were talking a day ago about what positive strides we've made to get to where we are. You spoke about some of them. The fact that the minister himself, when he opened the meeting this morning, he talked about the fact that he was coming back from New York, where he had been talking to investors who want to look at South Africa and come back and invest in a I'm going to use Donald Trump's term here and say in a biggerly way, you know. So we have people that really are interested in the country, but you know, all these subtle, unfortunate scenarios, what they do, they create negativity, and unfortunately, they reverse the efforts that have been taken from the beginning of the year to deter the rating agencies from downgrading us, to deter from the actual goal, which is getting the country back on its feet to be able to have a growth of some sort. So the question is, what is our priority? Is it important that we have a minister in finance to be charged and to be put at the back? And I don't want to sound political here. I'm going to try and be as blunt as possible, but without sounding political. Are these charges so severe, so serious, so unforgivable that this ministry should be put to the test that they've been put so that they can actually compromise the economic growth of this country? That's the question. That's why I'm saying prioritization. Where do we put our priorities? Is it to save the country's economy or to actually execute or prosecute people that should be charged? In actual fact, if the law must take place, the law must take place.
Yeah, well, those answers and more, I'm sure, will come out on the 2nd of November. Clive Ramathibela-Smith, ANN7 business editor. Thanks indeed, as always, Professor Yanni Rousseau, business analyst from Wits University. We take a quick ad break. We'll see you shortly.